I would assume that the number for Micah Parsons needs to be like 41.1 or 41.5, and they could do this deal, Tom, before we get off the air today, hypothetically, couldn't they?
It'll be higher than that.
Okay, so let's say it's 40. Let's say it's 42.
According to Jerry Jones himself, they had a handshake deal done back in March, but that ended up not getting finalized. A big piece of this is always the Cowboys want to do longer deals, strong cash flow up front, but then buy up team-friendly years on the back end of the contract. Mike has got a very experienced agent, David Mulugeta, whose name I'm sure by now Jerry Jones knows, who prefers to do shorter deals. And so I don't know that at this point there's necessarily a rush based upon the fact that in Micah and Jerry's conversation, they knew where the number was going to be. It was always going to be north of 40. I believe it was always going to be north of 41. The real issue here is what does the structure look like and what is the length of the deal? I anticipate, and I know the Cowboys anticipate Micah showing up to Oxnard on time next week. Whether or not he practices remains an open question. He surprised them by actually doing some things back in OTAs in the spring that he did not have to do at that time. And then also you've got a couple other situations looming out there as well. In my mind, the Micah Parsons number was always going to be north of this. It was going to be closer in all likelihood to 45 than it was to 40. You've got
wait. 45.
I'm not saying it will be 45. I'm saying closer to 45 than 40 was likely the number, just because Micah is younger than Myles Garrett. Obviously, Myles is an unbelievably accomplished player, perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate. But just based upon how these deals tend to go and how the markets tend to work, if a roughly 30-year-old player gets 40 and now a soon-to-be 31-year-old player gets 41, what does that mean for, I think Mike is 26, a 26-year-old Micah Parsons? And then Aidan Hutchinson is another one. He's coming off of a obviously significant injury. Everything seems like it's all systems go. He's in a different spot because they don't have to necessarily do something. But if the Lions want to get ahead of the market, and once Micah gets out there in training camp, once Aidan gets out there in training camp and looks like himself, maybe the Lions try to jump in here too, just because Micah's deal is in all likelihood going to blow this out of the water. And all that is with the backdrop of Trey Hendrickson, who is almost exactly the same age as TJ Watt, has not been asking for upwards of $40 million. The Bengals to this point have not wanted to do the type of multi-year commitment in terms of an extension with Trey Hendrickson that he wants. And there's a fair argument. I'm not saying that, now this adjusts the expectations or anything else, but if TJ Watt, who has been, more beat up physically, did not produce as well down the stretch last season, had fewer sacks than Trey Hendrickson, is the same age. If he's getting 41, why would Trey Hendrickson not be right in that same type of a bandwidth? So there's a bunch of different interconnected parts. We talked about this, Andrew, on Super Bowl Sunday on NFL Network, that this was going to be the offseason of the pass rusher. You saw Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, Danielle Hunter get their deals early in the offseason. Now you see TJ Watt. The big pieces remaining are Micah Parsons, who I believe that one ultimately will get done. I said a couple of weeks ago on this show, TJ Watt will get done before training camp in all likelihood, and it'll be north of Myles Garrett. That part happened. Micah Parsons, I would tell you, was always going to be north even of this number. I still anticipate that gets done prior to the start of the regular season, but it may not be in the structure that the Cowboys want. Aidan Hutchinson, we'll see when they decide to, put the pedal to the metal here. He's got no reason to be in a rush himself. And then Trey Hendrickson is the one that's, of course, been the ugliest of all these. Yes, TJ Watt also skipped minicamp, but Trey Hendrickson has literally shown up during a practice and held a press conference about how ticked off he is with the organization. Are we going to get another one of those as the Bengals get set to report to training camp next week? I know Trey's been up in that area, doing community work and things like that. It's entirely possible. That's the one that's the most curious in this, particularly because, again, for anybody who doubted that a pass rusher on the wrong side of age 30, as it historically has been, could get $40+ million. Well, TJ Watt just disproved that. And if anything, the Trey Hendrickson price, you would think just logically now has to go up.
Yeah, let's unpack that one, because to me, Trey Hendrickson is the most fascinating of them all. I agree with you. Micah, look, the Cowboys report to what used to be the Residence Inn in Oxnard on Monday. I whatever, he'll be there, and when he practices, call me when he does. Trey Hendrickson, though, I wouldn't be stunned, Tom, if he doesn't show up. He's actually 2 months younger than TJ Watt. I don't think people realize that. And the last 2 years collectively, the 23 and 24 seasons, nobody has more sacks in the NFL than Trey Hendrickson. Nobody has more sacks. Yet,
and listen, TJ's pushed through a lot. Okay, I don't mean to in any way minimize what TJ Watt has done, but if you just look at the injury report, he's had some pretty significant types of injuries. Look down the stretch of last season. If memory serves, I don't believe TJ Watt registered a sack in the Steelers' last 3 games last year, including the playoff game. And the whole defense didn't play well. Obviously, there's all kinds of issues that Pittsburgh had, which is why now they've revamped the roster the way that they have. But Trey Hendrickson is a guy who, remember, a year ago, back in the summer of 2024, requested a trade and then ultimately showed up and went through it because the Bengals had challenged him, according to Hendrickson, to say, hey, go out and do it again, and then we'll get the contract addressed. Well, he goes out and leaves the league in sacks, yet here we are talking about whether or not they should make a multi-year extension offer to a guy who remains one of the most productive players. TJ Watt just got $108 million fully guaranteed. Trey Hendrickson has not been asking for $108 million fully guaranteed. He hasn't been asking for over $40 million per year. To this point, the Bengals have not been willing to give him what he is asking for. Do the Bengals move at this point? Does this get even uglier? A trade is hard to imagine because when they actually did at least explore that and accept calls before the draft, nobody was willing to offer him a first-round pick. There's still a lot of different directions that one could go. Obviously, Trey Hendrickson means a lot to the Bengals' hopes, you would think, in 2025, particularly at a time that they're still going through with their first-round pick as well.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.